The Ozone.
Welcome to the Ozone Podcast with Jaguars senior writer John Ozier.
All right, welcome into this week's Ozone Podcast. And I say every week how much I look forward to the guests. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But in this case, I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to this. I am joined today by longtime and now former, believe it or not, Florida Times Union columnist Gene Frenette. Gene, first of all, I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, glad to do it. I didn't know that I had to retire to finally get on an Ozone podcast.
Well, that's kind of the rules around here. No current media. That's not true. Is it? I know it's hard for me to believe that you've actually retired because I never thought you would. Is it hard to believe, and how is it going after a couple weeks?
No, not really, because to be honest with you, when my wife retired like 18 months ago,
okay,
we kind of pegged the spring of 2025 as sort of being the finish line for me, because I knew I'd do one. I said I'd do a couple more seasons, but I didn't know if I wanted to really do a third.
Right.
It just too cognizant of the fact that you wait, and while you may get some financial benefits out of it
Sure.
by maxing out your Social Security. The flip side is that you don't know. None of us are
Right.
promised tomorrow, and I wanted to be able to go out while I still felt like I was somewhat at the top of my game, but also healthy,
Sure.
and be able to do things with my wife in retirement. And so that's why I did what I did. I don't judge it on anything else other than that. And to be honest with you, your body and mind will sort of tell you when it's the right time.
Told me
And
10 years ago, Gene.
So so I just kind of felt like it was the right time, and I've had no regrets about it. It was the right decision for me. For others who want to, stay working in the media into their 70s or whatever, if that's what they choose to do, then that's fine. I just didn't want to do that.
Fantastic. We talked a little bit. I joke with you over the years more than we actually talk, so I'm looking forward to actually talking. Because I like to give you grief. But 44 years, man. I mean, I know we talked a little bit when you first announced, when I first found out. That's an unbelievable career, Gene, in this media age. So first, congratulations. And do you have a sense of, sort of navigating a tough industry? I guess how rare it is going to be for somebody to have a 44-year career as a columnist, sports media, whatever that means.
Well, the ironic thing is that when I left the Palm Beach Evening Times in '81, and I was the prep writer there, and I took the same job at the Jacksonville Journal for $70 more a week.
Right.
And
It's big money.
Yeah. And when I left, the guy who replaced me in Palm Beach, ironically, is Tom D'Angelo.
Sure.
And Tom is still there. So he's been 44 years in Palm Beach as well. So, I mean, obviously it's a coincidence. I figured when I came to Jacksonville, I'd be here like 2 or 3 years and then move on somewhere else. I really liked the job. Wasn't all that keen on the city when I first got here. First of all, it took forever to get anywhere. I mean, you don't realize how big Jacksonville really is.
And there was no bypass. I mean, it was a different driving world than many people who are listening today realize.
And speaking of driving, and every time you went over a bridge, you had to dump a quarter into the thing, right? Or you bought the $2 book of tickets. You got 10 tickets for $2.
So you did what I did, which was do the fake. And then once you went through and the bell rang, you went like you missed.
No, I never did do that because I knew that the people who do get caught on that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not worth the
not.
consequences for not having
I
a
was
quarter.
fortunate. Friends of mine did get caught. So I want to get into some of your thoughts on journalism, but this is a Jaguars-centric podcast. I want to ask Jags first. You've seen so much of this organization, and you saw a glimpse of what's going on now with Tony taking over. What are your thoughts on the direction the team's going now?
This is a very early projection without really they haven't put enough to me on the table yet to make a clear-cut judgment on how it's going to go over the long haul. I would say what they've done so far I like. I'm optimistic about where the direction that this franchise is headed. But again, I say that because we all know what happens. The April, May, June, July is what I call the fool's gold time of year.
Yeah, they're unbeaten.
Everything's great.
Right.
There's optimism, with all 32 teams, possible exception of the New York Giants or what have you. But this time of the year, every year, fans get fired up, right? And they even get more fired up when there's change. They got fired up when Urban Meyer was hired.
Yeah.
And they certainly were fired up after Doug Peterson's first year, thinking, hey, this is going along on a very good path. And it just goes to show you that the NFL is every year, with the exception of maybe what the Chiefs have done under Andy Reid, it's really hard to predict because injuries, factor into it. And when you've got a new regime, you look at the Jaguars depth chart right now, there's probably like 13 or 14 guys, which is not an unusually absurdly high number, that are on the too deep chart that are new arrivals. They're either unrestricted free agents that they paid for, or they're draft picks. And to me, what I like about what this franchise is doing is they seem to be creating genuine, legitimate competition at a lot of different positions,
which is hard to do. People talk about competition.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
Real.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking. I just took a glance at the Our Lads depth chart for the Jaguars, and I could legitimately look at that depth chart.
Please tell me, Gene, that you did that to prep for this podcast, and that's not what retirement looks like for Gene.
Correct. That's correct. Right. That's correct. Yes, the former is true. But you could look at about 5 positions where they projected a starter where it wouldn't be that outlandish to see the second guy listed be the starter.
Which, as you said, is rare. Competition is often lip service, and it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I can easily see 2 or 3 offensive line positions. The guys that are listed there now, might be the backup come September 10 or whenever the season opener is. So I think from that standpoint, and I just like the idea that from the very moment James Gladstone got here, and you look at certainly what happened. I mean, everybody's obviously talking about Travis Hunter. I mean, Travis Hunter has taken over as the face of this franchise, which I'm sure Trevor Lawrence is more than happy to bequeath to him, right?
Sure.
Because Travis has got a little bit more of the personality to kind of take on that sort of thing, that he would kind of welcome it a little bit more. But, just the bold move to go up and get Travis Hunter. I mean, I wrote about it because I was still a week out from retiring when they drafted him. And I just thought it was a bold move that this franchise would not ordinarily make. It certainly would not have been made if Trent Baalke would have been the GM. That trade would have never happened.
Gotcha.
So I just kind of like that it's not just a fresh start, but you've also got a head coach who is coming off a track record of transforming the quarterback in Tampa and Baker Mayfield. And so there's a lot of signs pointing in a very positive direction. Is Travis Hunter going to be a future Hall of Famer like so many people seem to be projecting him to be, because the optimism about what he can do for this franchise is unbelievable.
Right, that's off-season talk, right?
Yeah. Personally, I think it would be easier for the Jaguars to play him more full-time as a cornerback and part-time as a receiver. But, I get it. Liam Cohen wants to generate the offense. I'm sure he's very selfish about trying to get the extra 3 or 4 points per game.
His talent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, I early on, I like the direction it's going, but I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, there'll be a minimum 11-6 this year.
Sure.
We'll see.
I want to get your perspective on a couple of history things, because you've been around this franchise as long as I have, and then you were around for 10 years when I wasn't here. We both have the perspective of what this team meant to this city, because we both predate the team. I grew up here. You were here for what?
14 years before they started playing.
So you saw it when I saw it, when the city was the Gator Bowl and the Florida-Georgia game and hoping against hope to get a team. Do you think that, and a lot of people our age are listening to this, but a lot of young people are, do you think young people in the city appreciate how much the Jaguars have changed? And I guess how because you, like me, have an attachment to it, how glad are you that it's secure now for the future? That has to mean something to you as somebody who has been about sports in this town for 45 years.
Yeah, I've never been of the mindset, even back and I remember when we had this conversation when you were still in Indianapolis.
Sure.
You wanted to take the job, but you were concerned about how long the team was going to be here.
Right, because I was an outsider at
And
that
yeah,
point. Didn't know.
and you said, "Hey, I need at least 3 years," and I said, "John, they're going to be here."
Right.
I just felt very strongly that Shad Khan was about making this thing work in Jacksonville because I knew what he had discussed with Wayne Weaver when he bought the team.
But now to clarify, I got back before Shad bought, so we were still
Correct.
talking during the Wayne years. So I was not sure.
Yeah,
So,
I just didn't. I just know how hard it is for an NFL team to move. It's not as if this happens a lot, right? I mean, yes, we saw the trucks in the middle of the night go from Baltimore to Indianapolis, and you saw what happened with Cleveland and Baltimore and how much Al Davis flip-flopped between L.A. and Oakland. But other than that, it's rare to get a circumstance where an NFL team actually moves. And I just kind of felt like I had no reason to doubt that Shad Khan wanted London as a financial supplement to his franchise, not as an option to go overseas, because I still don't think the NFL in Europe can work. I don't see how. I just think there are too many hoops to jump through.
Still seems a long way off, if at all.
Yeah, I thought it was much more dangerous, or for the Jaguars to move to an L.A. or a St. Louis or something like that than it ever was to London.
Right.
But to answer your question about whether the young generation can appreciate that, I don't know that you can, because if you've never known the Jaguars to be non-existent, it's hard to get a sense of what that history is. And as you know, I mean, it was a little bit of an upset when the Jaguars got the franchise, right? I mean, St. Louis had to drop the ball, and they dropped the ball, and Jacksonville capitalized it, got the turnover, and 30 years later, they're still here. Despite all the terrible seasons the Jaguars have had over the last 17, 18 years, and obviously I'm biased because I'm in the industry, but I just think the city of Jacksonville is so much better with the Jaguars than without them. It just gives you, first of all, it's a fantastic entertainment option for some people, and even for people who don't care about football, but care about Jacksonville wanting to grow as a city. I mean, you get a lot more respect when you have an NFL team than when you have no major pro sports franchise whatsoever.
No doubt. I could talk to you about a million different topics because we know a lot of the same topics, and you've been doing you did it for so long. But what, over the years, your relationship with Tom Coughlin, just covering him as an entity in this city, with the J Fund, with the team. When I say the word Tom, or I would say the name Tom Coughlin, first reaction, and then just talk about him.
Well, I would say when I think of Tom Coughlin, I think as much of the J Fund as I do of him being a two-time Super Bowl winning coach.
Right.
I mean, I think more people obviously will think of him as a two-time Super Bowl winning coach, and I hope one day that his resume gets him into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But that's a separate topic. That's becoming more challenging. But when I think of Tom Coughlin, I think of the foundation upon which the Jaguars were built. I mean, it's like you have this, you're building this house, and before you can design the kitchen and the bedrooms and all that other stuff, you have to have the foundation. And to me, that's what when I think of Tom Coughlin, I think of the guy who built the Jaguars foundation. And he had the power to do so because he was both the GM and the head coach. And he did a fantastic job. I mean, 4 postseason appearances, 2 AFC title games within the first 5 seasons is pretty remarkable.
I've always been intrigued, probably as we've gotten further away from it. I'm going to shift to college football for a second. the time that we covered college football together, I only covered for a couple of years, but I covered the Spurrier area, and you were right there. You touched the Bowden era at FSU. Clearly the golden era of college football around here to me. Do you have an appreciation for how fortunate you've been to have sort of seen a lot of that level of college football up close, that era? I mean, it was, I'm not sure the Times Union covers it as much as it used to, but during that time, you were faced front for the best.
Yeah, not only was it a golden era for college football in this state, and I think you would be hard-pressed to find two more successful head coaches who were coaching at rival schools than Bowden and Spurrier.
And we almost took it for granted.
Maybe Tom Osborne, obviously,
Yeah.
right, and his era, right,
Yeah.
with Barry Switzer.
Right.
That's the only other one that I could think
Right.
of. Okay, I mean, Bo Schembechler, Woody Hayes.
Right.
I mean, but
And I was too young and dumb to realize it. Or to
but yeah,
appreciate
so
it.
that was
Right.
the 90s. And all of this coincided, by the way, with a time where newspapers really mattered. The internet,
I guess that's what I was getting
The
at,
internet
Lloyd.
hadn't been really full-fledged yet, right?
It truly was the golden age in that sense.
And I mean, the 80s and the 90s for newspapers, and also the 70s and 60s and all that
Sure.
as well. I mean, the 90s was kind of like the last part of the golden age for newspapers.
Right.
Right. And it just so happened to be at a time when Florida and Florida State, Florida State was on a 14-year streak of top 5 finishes. Spurrier was winning like six
Right.
SEC titles in a 12-year span at Florida.
Those were the days, my friend, we thought they'd never end.
Yeah,
Right?
and by the way, the Jacksonville has an NFL team,
Yeah.
and they're going to the postseason,
Right.
year after year. I mean, I don't know that football in this area will ever have a better time than that.
Right.
I mean, you hope they will,
Right.
but you'd be hard pressed to find something better than that.
Well, it's hard to imagine. You assumed they're both in the top 5, and for a little while, it's been a while around here, but for 3 or 4 years, you sort of assumed this team would be in the postseason. So that's exactly right. This is very journalism 101, and I'm sure people who don't care about journalism will fall asleep, but it's my podcast. So where do you see it going? In terms of newspapers, your position. I grew up dreaming of wanting to be a columnist. Now it's not quite, it's a tougher industry to define. You're not really the rock star as much as maybe the mid 90s, right?
Right.
Where do you see it going, in 5-10 years?
Quite frankly, I don't like the direction it is going. A lot of content that you see, sports content, that you see on the internet now is somebody playing off what somebody else wrote.
Aggregated copy, sure. Yeah.
They see, this is what, somebody on ESPN said about this, and then they create a blog about that, and that gets thrown up there. Everything's like these short, blurpy reads now that people
No depth.
That, there's no time for storytelling
Right.
or anything like that. Now, which is why I kind of appreciate The Athletic a little bit, because they still they still
try.
reserve some room for doing that. But everything is throw it up on there, and the bigger name you can throw in there that's going to get more clicks. Have at it.
Right.
I mean,
And accuracy doesn't matter that much.
not as much. No,
Right.
it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's politics or whether it's sports. Just get a name in there so that they can put this up on their Google searches and to get the clicks and everything like that. I mean, think about this. The Jaguars are going to be playing the Kansas City Chiefs on a Monday Night Football game, right? Week 5, week 6. How many stories do you think in that week are going to be about Travis Hunter versus Taylor Swift?
Right.
I mean, it's the fact that you have to think about that just for a second tells you where the train is headed.
Yeah, and it's that could be a series of podcasts with people such as yourself and myself, and probably not get as much depth as you could because it's troubling for people like us. But okay, now I got to ask the question. You've got to tell me the story behind the turkey. Because anybody listening to this, there's a Twitter picture that I repost and many of my unfunny friends in the media tweet it. Was the turkey for real? Take me through the morning of the turkey.
The turkey was for real.
Because this is why everybody's listening to this podcast, Gene.
So here's the great irony about that picture.
Right.
I never, and when I say never, I mean NEVER, put anything up on social media about food.
Right.
Ever.
Except that one.
Except that one. I don't even know what made me do it. I was just sitting there at the table. I just took a picture of the turkey that was stuffed and all this stuff. And I guess just whether it was the angle of the picture or how the turkey looked, to people who saw it, it didn't look appetizing at all. Wait, what the heck is this? Right? I never dreamed it would take on the shelf life that it did. And here it is, like, I don't know.
Because I think it was right after I got back. It was 12 or 13.
It was easily over a decade ago. So it was just like this innocent. Oh, I'll just throw this up there. Not that I was expecting any great feedback. And obviously, if I'd have known what I know now, I would have never put the picture up.
Or maybe you would have. It's been a great. It has been a great touchstone for everybody. But do you have an appreciation, Gene? And I've never really talked to you about this. For a Twitter Gene has been followed. The turkey, and people, the fans, really have embraced you on Twitter. And there's a weird part of Twitter as well. But there are factions of Jaguars fans that Gene Frenette is part of it. And I think that's pretty cool. And I know you're a professional, but there's also that as well.
Yeah, I mean, number one, and maybe this is maybe the way my dad was. You got to be able to laugh at yourself.
Sure.
If you screw up or whatever, or you do something, and I'm not talking about a screw up where anybody's hurt or anything like that. I'm just talking about
a journalism, which is not.
Yeah, and if you make a mistake, you just own it. You own it, right? I mean, nobody does their job absolutely perfectly where they don't make mistakes.
Right.
Okay. That's even true for a Northeast Florida cultural icon.
Okay, I like that. Northeast Florida cultural icon and thought leader.
When I first saw that, I go, "Uh-oh."
Okay.
This is one of those things that John's going to make stick.
and for those of you who don't know, in the Ozone mailbag, fans, I think I did it once, and fans just love to sort of make up feats of strength for Gene, feats of cultural identity that he has nothing to do with, but associated with Gene. And he is longtime Florida Times-Union sports columnist and cultural icon.
Northeast Florida
cultural icon, Eugene P. Gene Frenette. And to set the record straight for a lot of people who watch this, Gene, as much as we tease him about the turkey, as much as we have teased him about different things throughout the course, has always been the best sport and gets the spirit of what things are. Yeah. And again, I think that's why a lot of fans on Twitter, because this is a long time, 15 years on Twitter, sort of interacting, being a guy that people go to on the Jaguars, and you've always, I thought, done a great job of embracing that.
Yeah. Well, I got a question for you in relation to this tag as Northeast Florida cultural icon. What came first, that or King of All Funk? Which came first? I think
King of All Funk may have been before that. It was probably around the same time, but I am the King of All Funk. Dude.
Yeah, well, and KOAF fits better than
King of All Funk.
NFCI.
Right. That is true. That is true. It's so. Are you going to miss it?
I will miss parts of it. I will not miss all of it. I certainly don't miss what the profession has become as we've gotten older. And as many people know, Gannett has not only bought the Times-Union, but they've bought up virtually all the papers in Florida, with the exception of Orlando, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and St. Pete. Okay. They own Gainesville, Tallahassee, Brevard County, West Palm Beach, Lakeland, Sarasota, Fort Myers, Pensacola.
Yeah, so
I mean, that's what they're doing.
It really is a news service.
They're creating their own state of Florida network.
Gotcha.
So Times-Union doesn't send people anymore to Florida football games or FSU games in anything.
Which is a mammoth change that's really tough for local. I mean, it just is.
I mean, it doesn't mean that as a columnist I couldn't continue to write about them. I just wasn't going to be traveling there to go get stories.
Yeah.
You got to get interviews by phone, and you have to rely on the SID departments to kind of deliver interviews.
Specify the difference in this day and age. I know I was around Florida when you were covering Florida. When you were the columnist, you had very personal relationships with Bobby Bowden and Steve Spurrier.
Yeah.
That would probably be very hard to replicate now, just because you're not in person. And for fans who are wondering why I'm talking about this, that affects coverage. That affects the depth of information that a fan in Jacksonville can feel for the program. It's just different. It's the way it is. But I'm with you. It's what I would miss it if I were in your shoes.
Yeah, and it's another reason why I think that people who cover the NFL, who have covered both college and the NFL, now much prefer the NFL, because at least you can go into a locker room.
Sure.
In college football, we haven't been in a locker room in 20 years or whatever.
Stunning to me, having covered it, but I know it's true.
Yeah, now they bring a select group of players to you, and then you get to interview them that way. But it's just you lose the personal connection that the media person, whether it's a columnist or a beat writer, has with the athletes. You at least have that a little bit with the Jaguars, although they will make sure that their big stars probably get to keep their distance, like Trevor Lawrence, and now Travis Hunter will only be a once a week guy in this coming season for the media to have access to. And of course, you'll have access after games, right? But so it's a much. It was so much more of a personalized business back when I was coming up in the 80s and 90s, and that part I will miss. What I won't miss is how corporate the newspaper game has become.
Yeah.
Now they're issuing playbooks to these.
It's more sterile
to the writers about, okay, here's what we want for this week. Let's make sure that we hit this story, not necessarily because it's a great story, but because they think that's going to get clicks, and that's what's going to stir up the Google searches.
Yeah.
And the thing is, even if something gets a lot of clicks, and I'll tell you, I'll give you a perfect example. One of the things that gets a ton of clicks down in the West Palm Beach area was stories about when all this live golf controversy was being stirred up. All of a sudden, they saw all these clicks, and they're thinking, "Oh, man, this is great," right? But it gets old after a while.
Right.
Okay, here we are. Here there are 2 years since Live and the PGA Tour were supposedly going to come to this agreement, and they're still, they're still, but they have to keep feeding that beast, because the writer may be tired. The writer may be tired about writing about it, but the higher ups don't get tired about seeing what the numbers say.
Right, but there's no substance to it anymore.
Correct.
So, all right. One thing we do here, Gene, is the Ozone 5, which is 5 quick questions. I'm going to change them a little bit for you because I want to get some information from you too. But Gene Frenette, what was your last binge watch?
My last binge watch on TV?
Yeah, on TV. You remember TVs?
Ooh, binge watch. I was doing a pretty heavy deal of Law and Order.
Okay.
I tend to, I guess I'm showing my age here. I tend to like the older shows more than I do the newer ones. I couldn't tell you anything about some of
Perry
these.
Mason thrown in there?
No, that goes a little too far back. I'm having a hard time getting off the Dateline binge now.
Okay.
That's another.
Okay.
That's
That
another,
fits.
And I prefer the 1 hour ones as opposed to the 2 hour ones.
Okay.
But yeah, if I'm going to do a binge watch, it's probably going to be that.
Music. What does Gene Frenette listen to on the way in? What song?
I'm probably going to give myself away. I actually, and this isn't, I'm not saying that this is necessarily my favorite, but there is a Christian station in town called K-Love that I do listen to quite a bit. Musical artists, I mean, Billy Joel's just one of my all-time favorites. I've been to probably about 5 or 6 of his concerts over time. Country music, a little bit, not a lot. But I don't have like
Rap.
one specific
Big
thing.
hip hop guy. Are you?
Yeah, that's me. But probably that, but not anything real. I'm not married to one specific station, that's for sure. I flip around.
I think I know the answer. Most memorable event you covered.
Most memorable event that I've covered?
Yeah.
Memorable to me because I was so familiar with them was the Hall of Fame induction of Tony Baselli and Leroy Butler. I mean, I've known them both and I knew Leroy back when he was 15, 16 years old because he was coached by Corky Rogers over at Lee, and I used to go over their practices. But to see them inducted on the same day,
that'd be cool.
And and I knew Leroy's mother so well because she lived in our Arlington neighborhood near JU, and I used to see her walking her dog. It was a shame that she wasn't around to see that, and also for Tony not having his dad, but just watching, not only watching the ceremony unfold and their speeches and all that, but going to their celebrations afterwards. I went to Tony's first. I went for an hour and a half, and then I went to Leroy's about 20 miles away. For about an hour and a half. Just the unbridled joy was just. I've never seen Tony so happy as he was that day.
Right.
And the same for Leroy.
Yeah.
And it was just, just knowing what it to get to the pinnacle of your profession and having it happen for such quality human beings. That was the best work day ever.
My guess is a close second would have been the World Series, Oakland, San Francisco. I remember you covered that from the paper back when the paper covered World Series events.
Yeah.
And you probably don't remember this, but I was a huge Oakland A's fan, and Gene brought me back an Oakland A's World Series pennant from that.
Oh,
that's how
I
far
had forgotten
back.
about that.
That's how far back you and I go.
Well, listen, what's amazing about how much the newspaper game has changed, not only did the TU send me out to California, but they brought me back after the earthquake delayed the World Series, and then I went back for games 3 and 4.
Yeah, for people in the business now, for the TU to have covered baseball without a team, it just shows you the money that newspapers had back then. It was a different game. Your biggest influence, like who's the reason that you're here?
Well, I told this story in my farewell column, but I was 12 years old going into my last year of Little League baseball, and my dad came home one night, and he was my coach for the first 3 years, and said, "I'm not going to be coaching anymore." And and I was like flabbergasted. It's like, "Hey, what do you mean? We're finally going to have a really good team this year because we got more 12-year-olds on the team than we had the previous years. I think we went from 2-12 to 5-9 to 7-7, and now we were going to have an even better team." And he says he's getting out, and so they completely reshuffled the whole league. And it turns out that the guy that was my new coach happened to be a sports writer.
Okay,
and he was a 2-time sports writer of the year in Vermont. And when I expressed an interest a couple years after I got done playing for him and being a sports writer, he let me go around with him to cover football games, keep the charts for him. But I got to see him go and interview people after the game. Sure. And I know it was only on the high school level, and you're only basically interviewing the coach. High school players weren't really interviewed back then, but coaches were. But it gave me a feel for what it was going to be like, and I wanted more of it. And then he helped me get my first job like about 9 months later when there came an opening. So in terms of influence, my Little League coach was big. And also when I was in West Palm Beach, Bill Piniella, who ended up coming to Jacksonville for about a period, a year and a half.
Yeah, I worked for
He
Bill.
was my executive sports editor there, and he was a really big influence because he wasn't afraid to tell you where you needed to get better.
Right.
And he would never do it in a face-to-face meeting. He'd always leave notes in your mailbox.
I remember that. Yep.
And that was very beneficial because you were getting honest, legitimate feedback. And as a young journalist, that's what you crave.
Yeah.
Even if it's something that he's critical, okay, but it's a learning experience. The older I got, the less you got of that.
Oh,
because everybody was so caught up in making sure that the higher ups were being pleased, right? They sort of lost the art. Sports editors have lost the art of actually teaching.
Sure.
And a lot of that gets lost. And a lot of the young guys that come up now, or young women that come up in the business, they're sort of, unless an older colleague kind of takes them under their wing, the sports editor is too wrapped up in other more important things to forget about being a teacher and a mentor.
Give me one column you remember.
Oh, boy. Let me start with a story first. In fact, it was Bill Piniella that came up with this idea. When the Cleveland Indians pitcher, and I forget his name, got killed in the boating accident.
I remember it.
And the other and another one got
Great story
as well. He said, "Hey, why don't you look into going down to see if the widow, who was still living in the house by the lake where the fatal accident occurred."
Yeah, this was probably mid to late 90s.
February of 94.
Yeah, okay.
It was when the Olympics was going on. The Winter Olympics was going on. And surprisingly, she agreed to it. So I spent 3 or 4 hours there at the house, visiting the site and all that. And I got in touch with other people who were on the boat.
I remember, yeah.
And and it turned out to be one of the more impactful stories that I wrote. And the TU nominated it for a Pulitzer. And
it was a stunningly good story. It really was.
But as far as a column goes, the memorable ones are probably the ones that might involve a little bit of controversy, whether it was a Jaguars coach being fired. I'll never forget after the 2010 season, when I think the Jaguars were 8-5 and they lost their last 3 games and finished 8-8, had a chance to win the division. Peyton Manning beat them out in Indianapolis. They had a chance to win the division. They ended up 8-8. And this was Jack Del Rio's 8th year as the head coach, and I advocated for his firing.
Yeah,
I just kind of felt like for 3 straight years, without playoffs, and it just wasn't going in a good direction. It wasn't like the bottom hadn't fallen out or anything. So I wrote the column. They didn't fire Jack.
Right.
And then my first meeting with Jack in April, after reading that, I brought it up. I said, "Look, I know we haven't had a conversation since I wrote the column advocating for your firing, but I just wanted to let you know. I mean, it was nothing personal or anything like that." And Jack looked at me and said, "Well, it wasn't very well received in my house." But he actually was very good about it. I mean, he understood that's part of the job, that's part of the gig.
Right.
And of course, before the following season was over,
shot bought the team.
It was shot, and it was just, and Jack, I think it was after, 13 games or something like that. Or maybe it was 11 because I think Mel Tucker finished the last 5 games. But yeah, that was kind of memorable because of I think I might have been the first one in the media to advocate for that, and then Jack's reaction afterwards.
Yeah. Wasn't well received in my house.
Yeah.
Well, Gene, to close, I just want to tell you, worked with you for 12 years at the TU, worked around you for 15. 44 years at the Times Union is an unbelievable feat. I am proud to call you a friend. I'm proud to call you a colleague. From day one at the TU, I don't say you took me under your wing, but always one of the more helpful people that I ever worked with. You'll be missed. Enjoy retirement. You have earned it, pal.
Appreciate it, John. I'll always credit you with the phrase "a little Gino is always Keno."
A little Gino is always Keno. Gene, thank you very much, my friend.
All right, thanks for having me.